Hi everyone, and welcome to another one of our virtual Yellowstone tours. Today I'm at Black Sand Basin. It was so windy the day that I was here that I had to delete the audio from the video, and now I'm sitting doing a subsequent voiceover. Up ahead of us is Cliff Geyser. Cliff Geyser is almost always erupting. You'll find that you're almost certain to see it if you do go to Black Sand Basin. It generally erupts up to about 40 feet high, and then as it continues, the eruptions get smaller and smaller. What I'd like you to do, please, is to take a look at a map of the area so you can see where Black Sand Basin is. If you go to yellowstonetours.net/map, that's yellowstonetours.net/map, you can see Black Sand Basin's location, and I'm going to drop a map in. You'll see that Black Sand Basin is situated literally just before the turnoff to Old Faithful and the Upper Geyser Basin area. There are three main geyser basins in this part of Yellowstone. Firstly, the Lower Geyser Basin, which is home to fountain paint pots. Then you'll come across the Midway Geyser Basin, which is where Grand Prismatic Spring and Excelsior Geyser Crater are located. And then the third of the three main geyser basins is the Upper Geyser Basin, which is home to Old Faithful. Having said that, there are two other delightful geyser basins in this part of Yellowstone. One of them is this basin, Black Sand Basin, and the other one is Biscuit Basin. And when you're driving from the Midway Geyser Basin towards Old Faithful and the Upper Geyser Basin, you'll pass Biscuit Basin, which you can see in another one of our virtual Yellowstone tours, on the right-hand side. Coming up ahead of us is the Iron Spring Creek. And the Iron Spring Creek is a thermal river. You'll notice the gold, orange, brown color, and that is created by bacteria mats when the water from the thermal features flows into the Iron Spring Creek. Those of you who've seen several of these virtual Yellowstone tours will know that I've mentioned before that the Firehole River is a thermal river, and it flows from the Upper Geyser Basin through the Midway Geyser Basin and then the Lower Geyser Basin before it joins up with the Gibbon River to form the Madison River. And the Firehole River is a thermal river because of the amount of thermal water that is flowing into it. Iron Spring Creek, which we saw a moment ago, flows into the Little Firehole River, which in turn flows into the Firehole River. Up ahead of us is Emerald Pool. Emerald Pool gave the original name to what is now called Black Sand Basin. It used to be called the Emerald Group. Now, scientists and the early explorers tended to name an area after the main thermal feature in that area. That's what they often did. So, for example, where Daisy Geyser is, and Daisy is one of what I call the Big Five geysers, where Daisy Geyser is, there's various other thermal features, and they're all called the Daisy Group. So this area used to be called the Emerald Group, which was named after Emerald Pool, which we're going to see in a moment straight ahead of us. Notice how there's boardwalks running all over Black Sand Basin as well as the other thermal areas, and you do need to stay on these boardwalks. It may not look like it, but the ground on either side of the boardwalk is potentially very thin. It can be literally 1/4 of an inch thick, and that's Emerald Pool. You can see how it got its name. Notice once again how the warmer colors are on the edges of the hot spring, and the center of the hot spring in this case is a blue-green color, but they're normally more of a very bright blue color. and I'll talk about that shortly. I was telling you about the need to stay on the boardwalks because the ground around them is potentially very thin, and if you step off the boardwalks, you can plunge down through the very thin ground and get badly scalded or possibly even killed by the thermal waters. The hot springs in this area and the geysers are reasonably hot. One of them, Spouter Geyser, has been measured at 199.9 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 93 odd degrees Celsius. Remember that Yellowstone is located at altitude, so the boiling point here is actually lower than the boiling point at sea level. And the boiling point at sea level is 212 degrees, if memory serves me correctly. Up here, I believe that it's 199 degrees, so Spouter Geyser's temperature is actually a little higher than the boiling point. We can see Cliff Geyser going off in that rather shaky shot in the background. Up ahead of us, where we see those people, are Rainbow Pool and Sunset Lake, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them once we've turned the corner and gone past this geyser. Also, to our right at the moment, and I'm sorry it's not in picture, but it will be a little later, is Handkerchief Pool, and I will tell you a little bit more about that as well. We notice just how beautifully blue Rainbow Pool is, and then off in the distance, Sunset Lake as well. The blue in the center and then the colors on the edges are really a function, amongst other things, of the temperatures. The centers of those pools are very, very hot, and there's very few organisms that are able to live in there. There are a few. They're called thermophiles, which means heat-loving bacteria. But as the water gets closer to the edge and then flows over the edge, so as you may imagine, the temperatures start cooling down. And as the temperatures start cooling down, so more and more living organisms are able to survive there. And this is what gives these great pools the colors that they do. If you consider Grand Prismatic Spring, for example, which is a Yellowstone icon, you have the incredibly blue area in the center, and then as you get to the edges, you get the greens, the yellows, the reds, and the oranges, and to a lesser extent, so you do with Sunset Lake, which we've just left, and Rainbow Pool, which is coming up on our left. Now, one of Yellowstone's main attractions, and it was actually more popular than Old Faithful, is to be found at Black Sand Basin, and that is known as Handkerchief Pool. And in the old days, people used to flock to this area, to what is now known as Black Sand Basin, to Handkerchief Pool. And what they would do is they would drop their handkerchiefs into the hot spring. The convective currents would whirl the handkerchiefs around, and the theory was that once they'd been inside that hot pool for a while, so they would get cleaned, and then they would pop up to the surface, and they would all of a sudden be clean again. And we can see Cliff Geyser going off again in the background. This practice, as you might imagine, was banned by the authorities quite some while ago. I had previously told you in another one of these virtual Yellowstone tours, the one down at West Thumb, about how you used to be able to cook a fish in Fishing Cone Geyser, and that's actually a true story. and you may like to see the West Thumb Virtual Yellowstone Tour for more information on that. But that practice, once again, got banned, and today you'll just have to satisfy yourself with looking at Fishing Cone Geyser. This area is called Black Sand Basin because of the amount of obsidian that is to be found in this area. The sand is basically very small granules, tiny pieces that look at how the camera lens was covered up by that hot spring. You'll find that this is really a great place to come and clean your eyeglasses. If you stand in the steam that's coming off a hot spring, get your glasses somewhat steamed over and then wipe them down, it really is a marvelous way to get them cleaned. I mentioned to you that there's obsidian in this area, and the black sand, that's the forces of nature, and I'm going to have to be quick here because we're getting to the end of this virtual Yellowstone tour. But the forces of nature basically caused sand effectively to be rubbed off the obsidian, and hence the name Black Sand Basin. Well, I'm afraid that I've come to the end of another one of these virtual Yellowstone tours. I'm sorry I had to do a voiceover rather than narrate it live, but you can see a live version as well with a bit of wind in another one of our virtual Yellowstone tours. If you enjoy our virtual Yellowstone tour series, please consider giving us a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. Otherwise, see you in Yellowstone.